Hi guys, my name is Marina Lantos. I am one of the core team members for East Coast Salon Services, and today's haircut is going to be a preview for spring trends. So our forecast for the spring haircuts are going to be like a shaggy, mullety look. So what I have so far is a section of my doll head right at the round of the head on both sides, and then separated the front from the back. We already have a previous shag with it, which is the haircut that we have on a doll head. So I'm gonna work with what I have here because I find that this is a really popular haircut going into the spring, and how we're going to update it from this point. So she's got a fringe that's a little bit on the heavier side. We're gonna go ahead and put a little bit of softness and a little bit more airiness to it. So we're gonna take a section that's going to be a vertical section directly in the center of the head. I'm going to use the existing length as my guide. I'm going to elevate the hair and then point cut right into the ends of the hair. So what point cutting does, it softens the ends of the hair and creates more looseness and more serrated edge. So I'm going to spin so you can see my elevation, and every section is going to get over directed right into the center. The reason for it is I want to create a little bit more length on the outside of the section, which means I'm going to create the most amount of movement in the middle and less and less and less movement as the farther I go away from the center. So you want to elevate somewhere around here. Elevation does not really matter so much here as much as what we do with our point cutting. So when I'm point cutting, I'm going a little bit deeper on the inside of my section and slightly less up here. The reason for it is I want more looseness underneath, closest to the forehead, and heavier on the top. So I'm gonna have the camera come a little bit closer so you could see my movement of my fingers a little bit better. Elevate, over direct directly in the center. I'm gonna find where the heavier points are, remove a little bit of the weight from here, and then go right in a little bit deeper and closer towards my fingers. So the amount of movement that I'm creating here is about 1 inch, where here I'm only going in about a 1/2 inch into the section. I'm going to continue all the way until I reach the highest point of the eyebrow. Over direct everything right into the center. Don't really have much going on here because everything is already been pre-cut. Now I can do the same exact thing on the opposite side. So I'm going to switch my positioning so that you guys can see my sections again. Here's my middle section. I'm going to make sure that I'm over directing everything right on top of the nose. So normally I would use a mirror to help me figure out where that center is, right? Because we always want to rely on a mirror to be our best friend to tell us whether we're holding our fingers correctly or not. And you guys can tell how much softer this is laying in comparison to here. So that's the look that we're going for. Now, if a client has cowlicks or hair growth, or the hair is finer, just be careful with how much movement or how much weight you remove and how much movement you create in the hair. The more movement you create, the more cowlicks are going to act up because the more weight you are removing from the hair. So this is kind of like the easy part. You go through, you fill out the hair, you figure out how much density needs to be removed. And then always look in the mirror, see if any of the pieces need to be trimmed up to make it fall softer. So I think that looks really good. You can go right into the layers. So now again, I separated the front from the back. So I'm going to use the longest piece from my fringe as the guide, and I'm going to lift this all the way up. This is really important. Which longest piece do you want to use? Do you want to use the piece that's coming from the round of the head, because that's going to be pretty short, or you want to use the piece that comes from the top of the round of the head, which is going to be the heaviest point of the fringe? So I definitely don't want to go super short on the top because I want it to be mullety, but I don't want it actually to be a mullet. So I'm going to point cut right into this length, and I'm going to keep my fingers parallel to the floor. That's going to create the same length in the front of the section as it is in the back. take my next section. I'm going to over direct right into the center, so right into the previous section. I'm going to keep my elevation exactly the same, and so will be my over direction right into the center, the same for the whole entire major section. So major section is called a zone. A zone is something that we work with throughout the haircut, and it's usually clipped out of the way. So why do I want to over direct all of the hair right into the center? The reason for it is I want to preserve some of the length that's going to be towards the end of the section, right? By over directing, I'm preserving length. And the reason is if I don't preserve the length, I'm gonna end up being very short at the round of the head. And if it's very short at the round of the head, it's going to be really hard for me to connect these lengths with the overall length. What's gonna happen is I'm gonna end up cutting into the outline. And if I cut into the outline, she's gonna have a much shorter haircut. So we just have to be very careful when we do this. The reason why I section off right at the round of the head here is this is where I know is going to be the length, right? So if I wanna make sure that I preserve this, I want to give myself a very good, almost like a border to know which areas I should not be cutting. So here's my last section. Point cut into it. I'm gonna let this fall a natural fall, and you can see how this length in here is shorter and it's gradually getting longer. So now I'm gonna remove these clips, and now I wanna connect my top to the bottom. So she's already been layered here, so I wanna make sure that I'm not removing too much length, just creating softness and connection between the sections. So I'm gonna lift this, now take a vertical section, lift it, and you guys can tell, here's my length that I cut from previous section, and I'm gonna go ahead and connect these two. So I can connect it a bit more blunt if I feel like the hair has a lot of texture naturally, or I can go ahead and point cut into it as well. And that will depend on the density of the hair, that will depend on how much texture the person has, and how much movement you want to create within the section. So now I'm gonna stay on base. On base means where the hair grows from the head is exactly where I'm going to be cutting it. So careful not to over direct it forward or back because it won't match up to the length that we have on top. Here's my third section. Find where the hair grows from, bring it straight from that point. Here's my guide, connect it right to the length, and I go ahead, go back in and point cut a little bit. And I have one last section left. Make sure I find where the hair grows from, not over directing it forward or back. And just trimming out these pieces to make sure they match up to the guide underneath or in front of my section. All right, so here's my side is done. So now you can tell that the movement here, right, it's much skinnier, much more head rounded. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the opposite side. now that we finished with our sides, we're gonna continue right into the back. So we have a guide that kind of goes from short to long in here, and then continues going even longer on the top. So we're gonna take a diagonal section that's going to pivot right from the center of the head. And I use our side as the guide. Lift all the way up, find your guide, and then from this point, because this is the length that's behind the ear, and you have a little bit more hair to work with than in front of the ear, instead of bringing it all the way up, we're gonna bring it just a tiny bit more parallel to the floor. So this is where we brought the front pieces, and this is where we were bringing the side, the back. The reason why we are lowering our elevation is because we have a lot more hair to work with. So we want to make sure that we're cutting a bit more length to create more movement towards the bottom of the hair. So towards the round of the head. Go in point cut pretty deep right on the outside to make sure that the bottom stays nice and skinny. The hardest part about working with a dry haircut is making sure that you're working really clean and very neat. Sometimes it helps to put a little bit of a leave-in conditioner into the hair to make sure that the hair listens. Bring it all the way up first. Find your guide. Point cut or blunt cut, it's up to you. And then bring the elevation somewhere around here. Now you can change this elevation and you can bring it higher if you want less movement on the bottom, or you can bring it lower if you want to see less length and more movement. Point cut pretty strong. Make sure there are no random pieces. Now continue moving with each section to make sure that I'm standing just behind the section. So I'm paying attention to where the hair grows from, and I'm taking that hair exactly where it grows from the head, bring it on base, bring it directly up first, and then again on base, bring it a little bit lower. Now if this is too much hair for you to keep in your fingers, you can go ahead and separate it in 3 sections. As long as you're keeping consistent with your elevation and your over direction, doesn't matter how many sections you take, as long as you are creating the same shape throughout each section. Now I have the last section that's going to be right in the center of the head, and I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So this section here, because it's right in the center of the head, should be brought directly towards you guys, because the natural fall is going to be directly in the back. Elevate a little bit lower. Point cut into it. And bring this to the same elevation as the previous section. So now I'm going to do the same thing, starting from the side, going right back, and I'm going to cross-check my last section to make sure that my right side and the left side match up. And to cross-check the haircut, we're going to take the opposite section and bring hair to the same elevation and the same over direction. So instead of taking vertical sections or diagonal section pivoting, we're going to take a horizontal section, bring it directly up, and then check for the cutting line. So make sure there's no heavy points right in those areas, and then point cut if you need to. I'm going to take the next section and cross-check to make sure that my right side and my left side are balanced. And you should see a slightly rounded line with the same amount of texture. Yep. Now that we finished the haircut, let's do a little bit of styling. I'm going to put a little bit of anti-gravity spray by Kevin Murphy into the hair to make sure that I'm protecting from the heat, and it'll give me a little bit of more moisture in the hair so I can manipulate the hair. I'm going to use a small round brush, place the brush in going towards the face, and then use the blow dryer to really curl that section. I'm going to twist it halfway, heat it up, twist, heat, and then when I let go, I'll have a little bit more of a wave pattern. Come a little bit closer. Okay? Come up. And always make sure that you let these curls fully cool before touching it with your hands. And a little bit of touchable, which is spray on wax, to create a bit more grip and texture. And I'm going to use my fingers to shake this up, give her a little bit more messiness. Here's the end result. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you soon.